You're listening to the Human Story Podcast, conversations on the all-encompassing human experience.
This is brought to you by Yoked Media.
Well, welcome to the Human Story with myself, Lincoln.
Hi, I'm Shaamiela. Welcome back.
Shami, if you look at outside, I think some people have blown into Cape Town today, Hurricane City. And I can also see that it's, season for the tourists. You can see a lot of tourists around you against the museum downstairs here. And that's obviously really great for the economy. Because speaking about the economy, we've got an interesting guest today.
We do.
But I'll leave that over to Shaamiela,
Yeah, it's been an exciting time. The winds have done some interesting things to all of us. We were just debating whether or not it affects the internet. So let us know in the comments if you think that's real. We think it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're excited to have our very special guest.
Indeed.
She's a friend of mine now. Are we friends?
I think we are.
Awesome. So we'd love to welcome Kalnisha Singh to the studio, but also to this conversation. Welcome, Kalnisha.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Maybe let's start with just a short bio so our listeners can get to know you. A short bio. I mean, we're going to shorten it because this lady, she's incredible.
Phenomenal.
Exactly. So Kalnisha Singh is a developmental economist, ecosystem builder, and founder of KD Strategies, an advisory firm working at the intersection of sustainability, social impact, and economic transformation in South Africa. Her work focuses on translating complex realities, regulatory, social, historical, and deeply human, into the strategies that enable meaningful and sustainable economic participation at all levels of society. Beyond KD Strategies, Kalnisha is the founding energy behind a growing ecosystem of initiatives. Our Common Future, a thought leadership platform amplifying the Global South perspectives. Shaamiela, a community-based retreat and impact-intensive exploring healing, connection, and conscious leadership. And We're Connected, formerly We Connect, a network uplifting and connecting women in the energy sector. Kalnisha has received multiple awards for her work in both community and industry. Today, she partners with leaders, communities, and organizations who are committed to building differently, with presence, with purpose, and with a vision for futures in which people and systems are able to thrive, not merely survive. Wow, that's a word.
Yeah.
With that in heart and mind, let's begin by asking you what's really a standard question here on the Human Story podcast, which is, what does it mean for you to be human in this era of humanity?
Jeez. Start small.
You do big things. Okay.
Thank you. I think what it means to be human right now is something everybody, if they're not contemplating, should be because I think our social structures, our economic structures, have been designed in a way over the last couple of centuries to kind of dehumanize humans and dehumanize or homogenize the human experience, which is such a great travesty. So I don't really have an answer for that question because I think it's just one grand contemplation right now. I think the current human experience is really about acknowledging how different we all are, but also how similar we all are, that we're all part of this grand universe of largely unknown stuff. It's a beautiful story that the astronomers always say about how if it wasn't for the Big Bang, we wouldn't exist, literally, because we're all born of stardust. If stars didn't sacrifice themselves, we wouldn't have iron to fuel our bloodstreams. There wouldn't be oxygen. There wouldn't be all of these molecules that we need to survive. So in that grand chaos of the universe, we exist as humans because of some beautiful design. So we're all the same in that way. But we're all so spectacularly unique in our makeup. And that needs to be acknowledged and appreciated.
What a beautifully profound way of answering that. And I really love the part about it being a continuous contemplation, because I do think that's certainly where it takes me, thinking about that.
I just in the one part about saying about how little we actually do know. I saw a quote this week. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it says, when human thinks, God laughs. And I love that. I really love that, because it's so reflective of how we've become so individualistic and thinking that we're the makers of our universe. But in actual fact, we need others. I mean, we're built for connection. So I love that answer. And the fact that you say you can't really answer it is even more amazing to me on this podcast.
Yes.
Because it shows that there is a human component, that there's no perfection really in something, that it is a very kind of open kind of system really. I think, Kalnisha, the first question I really want to ask you, related a little bit to your work, kind of working as a development economist in South Africa, what issues do you find repeatedly arise inside companies that are still unseen or misunderstood really in a South African context?
There's so many. I mean, I think in this sort of time of my life, and at this point in my career, and also in this part of South African the economy as a whole, we don't realize the sort of systemic barriers that exist. Right? We sort of trained to overlook them and try to band-aid them and force things. But unless we sort of acknowledge the embedded stuff, it's very difficult to build something different. And when I talk about the embedded stuff, it's not just our political history or our economic history. It's about everything. So the fact that business places and workplaces and spaces and economic activity was never designed for the inclusion of women. That's not something that we've consciously addressed at all. So we've tried to include women into spaces, but we haven't shifted the design of those spaces, which creates those intrinsic barriers that we see but we don't acknowledge, great big white elephants. Similarly, in sort of leadership structures and leadership caveats, and even the cycle or business cycles are not designed for inclusion, and not just the inclusion from a gender perspective, but from a cultural perspective. And a simple example is we're currently part of like the BRICS nations.
Yes.
So we're doing a lot of work with China. In corporate South Africa, most corporate offices have like a big bouquet of flowers in the reception. Certain flowers and certain colors are so culturally inappropriate for Chinese business people. They won't do business in a space that has red flowers.
Didn't know that.
And it's something that we won't even think about.
Yes.
And it creates a systemic barrier to participation in that equation because you don't acknowledge the difference of the other. It's similar to like lilies. Lilies are a universal flower that symbolizes death.
Yeah.
Right. I love lilies. I always have lilies in my space, but it's very bad for business. And so there's lots of symbolisms that we don't acknowledge. And those are the kind of barriers that we're still seeing in corporate to acknowledging the human experience. But even more than that, right? I think the big Western narrative of corporate culture is so devastatingly harmful in a multicultural society.
Sure.
Because you're encouraging people to leave their identities at home. And that means that, we accept diversity as long as it thinks like us.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is fundamentally not diversity, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to use one example that came to mind. If I look at a space that I've worked in prior, I remember when moms coming back from maternity leave and there was no space allocated for them to do breastfeeding because obviously you go back home and obviously breastfeed the kids. And I remember someone telling the lady came back and said, go and use the storeroom because we don't actually have a space for you. Now, again, like you said, it's those conscious things we're not aware of at times that creates these barriers because it's like dehumanizing at times. I think of someone that brought something to me this week, obviously with the G20 summit happening next weekend. And they said to us, what would we think of kind of partnering with them in terms of initially as maybe a donation, but also in terms of affinity work with them. And for me, it was such a great thing because I had never really read up about the cause. And these are kind of conversations in a workspace where leaders are supposed to be, should bring these things to leaders because without that coming to you and having to change what you initially thought or how you think of things, it can't bring about change. So the mere fact that I went to research and go look and I thought it's a great cause. But again, it's my ignorance of not really exposing myself to that. And it was a learning thing for me too, to realize that you can learn as you go along in life. You don't have to become stagnant.
Yeah, but I feel like that's so interesting because it feels like it drives home that point about the more deeply something affects you, right? So whether that's in terms of your gender, your race, how you present in the world, the more, I guess, knowledgeable you are about it, the more attuned to it you are, right? And then getting that message across to people who don't feel as affected by that is what I'm hearing you say, Lincoln. So I know, Kalnisha, in our conversations that we've had, which got me to say, you have to come on our podcast. What I really loved and what I do love about your energy for me is that you really, really embody and sort of present as a very matriarchal figure. And I mean that not just in a way that is women in leadership. We use that term. That's not what I mean. I mean the true nature of what matriarchy means. And I know so much of our conversations was around that, and you've mentioned it right now, right? The inclusivity that is on paper, but isn't necessarily practiced. Can we talk a little bit about matriarchal versus patriarchal systems? We all know that we exist in a patriarchal system. It's gotten a lot of airtime and there's a lot said about it. But I think one of the misconceptions is that people believe that matriarchy is the opposite of patriarchy, but it's actually not. So would you share with us some of your wisdoms and experiences around that?
I think before I answer the question directly, you know how I love telling stories.
Yes. Oh, I love that part.
So the story I have to tell is that, the sort of, my perspective is always from an economic perspective. Right?
Sure.
Because that's my kind of education. And it's wild, actually, that over the last 200 years, we've happily adopted these sort of Eurocentric, global north, Western practices of economy and adopted them. Not necessarily physically, because in the emerging economies, we haven't quite reached that level of development as yet. But sort of aspirationally, that's what we want to be. It's crazy because in the grand scheme of economic systems, this sort of hyper-capitalistic, consumer-driven, individual-focused economic system is only 200 years old. Whereas the sustaining economic systems of the world are those of China and India, over 5,000 years old, right? They've proved their ability to sustain in and for the collective as opposed to for the individual. So that says something about the human condition.
Yeah.
Yes.
But what we also have to acknowledge is, and this comes back to your point about patriarchy and matriarchy not being different. They're actually like two sides of the same coin. You're required in an economic system, in a practical financial or capital system, to have this balance between transactional and investment behavior. So the income statement and the balance sheet for the economists and financiers of the world. Patriarchal systems very much take care of the transactions, the income statement. But we know that the income statement is not where you create value. You create value in the balance sheet. And the value is what sustains. Right.
Yes.
So you can, and we talk about like subsistence businesses at the sort of bottom tier of an economic market, where people are just conducting trade to like fulfill their daily needs, subsist essentially. And then you have businesses that create value, and businesses that create value take care of their income statements, their daily needs. But they also buy assets. They also generate wealth in that business system, and that becomes a valuable, sustaining thing with an own entity or own, it becomes an independent entity, independent of the people working in that business. Right. And sustaining economic systems understand this balance between the transaction and building the value, balancing the patriarchal and the matriarchal, and then create long-term sustainability. So, like from our perspective and in the sort of global economy right now, there's lots of conversations about sustainability and ESG and all of these fancy terms. But what we're really struggling with is balancing the masculine and the feminine.
That's exactly it.
I love that.
Yeah.
On that topic, for women who feel stretched thin and guilty for choosing themselves, what do you say to help them reimagine a life where they don't abandon their needs for the sake of others?
That's such a good question. There's another story. I'll tell you the story.
Yes.
The story is this. A lot of us, most of us have forgotten who we are. Right. From an identity perspective, we're all very disconnected from the true essence of who we are because for various reasons. In South Africa or on the African continent, the systemic destruction of cultural value and significance and the rewriting of history in a very colonist, Eurocentric, Anglo and or from an Anglo and French perspective, largely on the continent, has removed people from their lineage and from their identity and from who they are. And it's very easy to become what somebody else says you are when you don't have any link to your own identity. And that's happened for women as well. So it's an easy example on the African continent because we can talk to colonization and the slave trade and all of the invasions that happened that remove people from the land and remove people from their identities and from their cultural systems.
Yes.
Right. But for a whole gender, for 50% of the global population, it has been more subtle. Subtle disconnection from who we were or who we are intrinsically. Any woman that stepped out of line and, felt her power was called a witch and then burnt at the stake.
Yeah.
Or the eternal spinster or whatever, right? So it's very difficult for a woman, even in modern society, to fully own who she is.
Yeah.
Right. And if I can't be who I am, and then I also can't be who you want me to be, where does that leave me? It leaves me racked with guilt and insecurity and I'm not enough.
I love that reflection, and I think it's a very helpful perspective for women, I think, and a very different one. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because I do think that I've heard in the past, when we birth children, we birth guilt. Yes.
I'm going to add to the conversation now, Kalnisha, but so part of my healing journey, I said what I really kind of struggle with in this day and age is like, because there's a supposed awareness of masculinity and what a male should be. I'm talking about kind of being softer and more gentle and being conscious. Because there's so much content out there, there's even more pressure on men to kind of play that role. And I find for myself in this age, people are saying a lot about it, a lot of talk about it, but I don't see it really dropping and landing with a lot of, especially in my own circle of friends. I find that guys want more of it, but as soon as you go down that road, their clothes are shut down. So I find, particularly in my field with my friends and my surroundings, whenever I've tried to have those conversations, I seem to get blocked. And it's so difficult because I'm really craving for spaces where I can actually have those conversations. But I'm getting blocks from men where they're saying, let's talk about these things. And as soon as you venture and you make yourself vulnerable to go down that road, then you get blocked.
Do you have a reflection on that?
It is interesting. I think that there's definitely a disconnect between our intellect and the intellectual part of ourselves and the emotional part of ourselves, right? And
I agree.
I don't know if it's by design, but I think it's definitely a trauma response.
It definitely is. I just want to add to that as you continue that thought. Please continue. But it feels a lot of what you've already said, which is this divide between the masculine and feminine. Because head is often masculine and further down below the neck is feminine.
But there's also all of these other things at play. And the thought that comes to me when you were, or the thought that came to me while you were sharing was that of like, what is safety?
Yeah.
And humans find safety in lots of different ways and in different bubbles and things. But the most obvious search for safety is the search with people that look and think and feel like I do, right? The safest spaces with people who are like me. And once you start, gnawing at those boundaries, it sort of starts becoming an unsafe space.
Yeah.
Which is, again, why the issue we have with diversity and inclusion in corporates is because it's safe when I went to school with everybody around the table.
Yes.
And when I start inviting other people in, it starts being less safe, Then I need to put my guards up. And
I mean, that's a really lovely reflection. And again, I'm thinking back to so many of the conversations we had. How do you approach that as a transformational specialist? How do you approach really getting to the crux of diversity and having those conversations? And I guess getting people to get real about it as opposed to just use the language.
Yeah. So I know the answer that you want me to end up at, but there's so many different layers to like creating that safety, especially in a boardroom environment, right? Because in a like a purely South African perspective, we have a regulatory ecosystem that is trying to force diversity and inclusion and employment equity and all of this stuff. And in that forcing, businesses have been forced to comply in order to achieve their licensing obligations and whatever else. But when you're operating from a place of compliance or fear, there's no safety there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's why we've created the storm that we're currently in around diversity and equity and inclusion. But when you get to the heart of it, I mean, I think the bottom line is always trying to remind people of their own humanity. And what happens in these spaces is the person that's in the minority typically comes with their guards up, right? So I deserve to be here. I've earned my way. I'm not better or worse than anybody else in this room, And so they're not incentivized to show their own vulnerability, which means that everybody else, and then from everybody else's perspective, it's like, oh, but you're an employment equity hire, diversity candidate. You haven't earned your way, no merit, whatever the other nonsense is in their minds. So they also put their walls up and there's no space for vulnerability. So if I come to you as the minority person and say, no, I missed the last taxi, of the 3 taxis that I've had to take to work, I missed the last one and that's why I'm late. What I'm doing is I'm affirming the other side of the story, that I don't belong here. Right?
Okay.
So I won't do that. And if on the other side of the equation, they witness a little bit of humanity in me. Right. And then, but like in my case, if I allowed at that point in my career for the other side to witness the humanity in me, maybe I had a vulnerable moment or was a little bit emotional or whatever, then it affirms their belief of me as well, that I'm fragile and don't belong here.
Right.
So it's like, it's this wild game of chess that you're kind of navigating. And what we don't remember also when we're having these conversations about the elusive corporate is that it's all politics and it's all chess. Right. So the first thing we do when we're trying to break down these boundaries is name it. Like you put all the cards on the table. Let's name what the biases are, what the prejudices are, what the things, and then let us dispel those beliefs.
Yes.
And if the person in the room is only an affirmative action appointment, they've got no other merit than being here, then, your board has made the wrong decision in hiring them. But if they can prove their mettle and you can engage as humans, then we can get past this very quickly.
Is that easy?
Nope.
I can tell you from a corporate perspective, it's definitely not easy.
What do you think makes it difficult, though?
What makes it difficult is, again, it's like when you see a job advert that's posted anywhere, Sunday Times, wherever.
Yes.
Right? The person that ultimately gets the job only probably meets 30% of the criteria on that job advert.
Sure.
That is just the reality of recruitment. So now you're sitting in a job and I can only do 30% of what they want me to do. So I know that I am not adequately qualified or adequately experienced for this job. And then what have we been told? To fake it until we make it. We can't admit that we only kind of know how to do 30% of this thing. Right? So now you're sitting at a boardroom with 12 other people who all kind of have 30% confidence in their abilities to fulfill their functions.
Yes.
And you're like, who admits what?
Right.
Wow. That hits the nail on the head.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm sitting with from what you're saying and what you have been saying for the last few minutes is the vulnerability. That's a word that stuck with me. Because to be human is to be vulnerable. And there's almost a denial of humanity. Not almost, there is a denial of humanity.
Completely.
I've seen it so often in a corporate space where I've myself gone in and feeling quite inadequate at times, all to find out that that's probably the same thought that's running through the 8 other people sitting in the room.
Yes.
But as you deal more in those spaces, you realize that everyone has the same insecurities. And it's so refreshing to hear that servant leadership can really make a space more open for people, because I've seen that. I've definitely seen that. It's like someone coming to address a company if they're going through a hard time. If he's someone that prior to coming to make a really difficult announcement has walked past some of the passengers and said like, "Hey Sia, I know your mom was sick, how are you doing?" And he shows the compassion side. If he were to come 2 months later and say to those people like, "This is happening, you guys must trust me," but there was no prior relationship built or showing empathy, they're not going to obviously trust him then. But if he's shown that he has a real investment in people and he actually cares about the individual in that employment group, it's a different scenario. And I've seen that play out with people. I've definitely seen that in practical, where people actually show interest in people and how they relate differently to others.
It's really interesting in the South African dynamic. So servant leadership is this wonderful concept, right?
Yes.
But again, like human behavior is fascinating.
Very.
It is.
So we want to experience that kind of servant leaderships, the sort of humanness of leaders in like a corporate setting.
Yeah.
But collectively as South African people, we want something completely different from our political leaders. Right. So as a collective, what we are hoping to see in our politicians is a symbol that inspires hope and possibility for the future. So I don't want you to be like me. I want you to be like the version of me that I hope I will be one day. Right. And the version of me that I will hope to be one day doesn't even acknowledge that I exist.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, I love that. I didn't never think about it.
Right?
Exactly.
You aspire to this like celebrity kind of mold.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is fascinating, which I mean again speaks to like the sort of aspirational dynamic that poverty kind of embeds.
Do you think that's why a lot of government systems, particularly in the West, kind of do really well at the moment, because they kind of highlight like people of a certain sector are the problem. So what I'll do is I'll show you what that is and I'll show you how to solve it. So you kind of find alignment, and then everyone else that thinks the same as you stick with them, and you have these little ideological bunkers and you don't question anything and sitting there. And then eventually after a while you say to the friend that's in your bunker, you go like, actually, how are we going to solve those problems that we have, the unemployment? And suddenly you say, but you're not actually seeing the same view I'm seeing. So now I eject you out of my circle. And I think that's a great way that division is happening currently. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, yeah.
Yeah, it's the old playbook, the art of war.
Yep.
Divide and conquer.
Yep.
I mean, we're seeing the increase of like right-wing politics now all across the world, even here in South Africa, right?
Yeah.
And what right-wing politics ultimately does is play on our need to have this leadership that is almost celebrity, larger than life, that kind of aspiration, especially as from an economic perspective, we are the wallet and the chains are tightening and tightening and tightening. So I think we all need to buckle up a little bit.
Yeah.
I do think so, but it's interesting because I'm thinking about that from the perspective of regulation and how speaking to the concept of safety, right, within the nervous system. And so right-wing politics soothes.
Completely.
It soothes. And when you have collectives of people that are just dysregulated, what am I going to do? I'm going to reach for the safety, however that presents, and then that system obviously plays on the fact that they can present themselves in a way that is going to look appealing to me.
And that goes back to like one of the very first comments you made around, having agency to speak your need and all of this stuff.
Yes.
You're only able to acknowledge what you need if you feel you're allowed to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why, like, in a system like apartheid, for example, so many people were comfortable in their subjugation.
Yes.
Because rocking the boat and speaking their need had like worse impacts potentially.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's the antithesis to survival,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And comes back to, I guess, that sort of induced tribal mindset. I mean, we all have a tribal mindset anyway as human beings, but that induced, I need to survive, and so I need the group. And so I'm not going to express my authenticity, right? And express my need. One of the projects that I really loved reading about, the Shaamiela, which means we are emerging. I really sat with that for a second when I looked at that. And its emergence with intention is my understanding. So, of course, I was drawn to it very fully. I guess my questions is, please speak about the project, but emergence from what and where to?
Ooh. So Shaamiela is a project that has been bubbling for probably the last 25 years, right? Since I started work in this kind of ecosystem. And the reality, the absolute irritating reality is that all of our kind of economic and industrial models, even education models that we work in the global south as a collective, everybody south of the equator, are models that have been imposed by other people,
Sure.
other nations, whatever. And so the model of economics that we have in the global south doesn't consider things like indigenous knowledge and indigenous systems and all of these things, right? But that's not the point. The point is the models we are working within are not designed for our success, which is why we are perpetually failing, right? So, and it is human nature to not blame the system, but to blame ourselves, right? Which is why the systems perpetuate and we fall deeper and deeper and deeper into this like doldrums of failure, as a collective. And then you see all those things play out from a very human perspective. Like if we all collectively feel like a failure, then those that have a little bit access to success is going to, milk it for all that it's worth and run with it.
Yes.
And the rest of us just fall deeper and deeper and deeper into like the darkness. But what is sort of emerging is that this unified understanding that we need to rethink these systems. So it's not enough for us from an economics perspective to plan our policies and our, things like our monetary policy that governs the interest rate. It's not enough for us to now just assume that the policy is sound and react based on what or react how the policy tells us to react. We have to rethink it because clearly what we've been doing for the last 25 years isn't really working.
Yes.
Right. But that's at every level, at every scale. And I was sharing earlier that in South Africa, we all know that we're a developing nation, but there's somewhere between 115 and 120 billion rands spent on development. Not development as in infrastructure development, but development as in social development and community work and all of this every year in this country.
Wow.
Now, if that was a financial investment, 115 billion rands, you're expecting to see a 15 billion rand return every year for 30 years, right? We're not seeing that. So the challenge we have is not a financial one, right? It's a systems one.
Yes.
Right? The systems are not designed in our favor. So Shaamiela the intention of Shaamiela is to bring together all of these stakeholders, partners, parties that exist in this sort of development ecosystem that have agency in their work to start rethinking and redesigning the system that we are working in, right? So we can emerge better outcomes with the investments that are being made. That's ultimately the intention. But the people dynamic in this equation is that we are all, myself included, working in a system that's not designed for our success. And over an extended period of time, you can imagine what that does for your motivation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? Because most of us get into this development work because we want to save the world. Right? We have this burning desire because of some childhood stuff.
Yes.
That, we can make a difference.
Yes.
And then year 1 happens and you're like, okay, no, maybe I don't know enough. And then year 10 happens and you're like, okay, but I think I should know what I'm doing now. But it's still not working. Right?
Yes.
And then by year 10 is usually the maximum. People usually leave. They go work at a bank after that.
Right.
Because now it's just about the salary. I need to feed my kids.
Yeah.
And if they stay on in the role, it literally is just that it's just because now it's just about the salary. Now it's just because I need to feed my kids, not because I want to make a change in the world anymore. And slowly what's been happening over the years is that it's only now starting to be seen as a career choice, not as a purpose or calling anymore. And we need to like reignite the flame in the people working in this space so that they remember that it's a calling. It's not just a salary.
Got you.
And that's why Shaamiela exists.
Wow, that's incredible.
That is really incredible. I mean, I suppose then one could really ask, like, what small actions from individuals that you've worked with have you seen that can create meaningful change without even, or with little resources?
There's so much. And it doesn't really take much. Like, in terms of resources, like I said, the money is all there.
Yeah.
The biggest, most meaningful change is remembering what it means to live in community. And I mean, everybody has that experience.
Yeah.
You know, even in corporate. Like, remember what it means to live in community. You know, for me, I wasn't just afraid of my own mother finding out that when I was being naughty. It was like anybody's mother could discipline me. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they didn't even have to be a mother. They just have to be of similar age
Yes.
to a mother. And, you know, they could discipline you.
Absolutely.
Right? It kept us in line.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
But, I mean, that's a facetious comment. But, like, also, it also meant that no kid in the neighborhood was hungry ever.
Yes.
Right? Because the mothers fed everyone.
Yes.
Right? With whatever little that they had. It wasn't about the money. And I was like, I think about that and I was like, the food was great. But it also meant that the kids didn't get to eat any protein. Right? Because you got gravy and rice. And the adults got protein, but it was fine because it was great and everybody was fed and it was great, right?
Yes.
And we all just need to remember that. Like, it's aspirational to live in community.
Yes.
Because everybody's taken care of. Right? We need to shift the aspiration. Right, because the aspiration right now is that you turn 18 and you leave home.
Yes.
And you remove yourself from the community. And I was like, but why?
It's really not it's not part of most Indigenous people's way of living. Again, that's, I think from the points you're making throughout this conversation, that's adopted, you know.
Completely adopted.
And it doesn't fit. It really doesn't fit a South African context and experience.
My recommendation always to everybody is just to think about, like, who does this choice serve? Right. It doesn't serve me as an individual to leave home when I'm 18 and I have no means of supporting myself.
Yes.
So who does it serve? And the answer is, like, in a Western construct, a Eurocentric construct, it serves the economy. It doesn't serve any other person. Because when you're 18 and you leave home, you need student loans to pay for university. The only person that student loan is servicing is the financial services institution that is earning interest on your loan, right, and those shareholders. When you are forced to rent a cheap apartment because you can't afford to be a homeowner, the only person that is serving is the landlord. Right. So just to think about in the system, in the sort of utopian ecosystem that has been created for us, who does it serve? So it's really just great marketing. It really just has been great marketing. I mean, Hollywood movies sell to kids the excitement about living on college campus and all of that stuff. We all know that, all of us that have been through the college system know that it's not like that. But our kids still aspire to that because they watch movies.
Yes. This is the conversation currently in my home. I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. Cannot wait to go and have that experience, which is really not real.
It's really not real.
I'm thinking about this idea that people can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves.
Oh, yes.
I've also come to, I think, learn that people can only meet their work as deeply as they've met themselves. How have you done that?
So, I mean, obviously when you're sort of working and dealing with clients and stuff, you don't necessarily know what you're gonna get
Yes.
at the other end of a contract.
Yes.
The one tool that I've used. So there's a story. Before I tell you about the tool, I'll tell you a story.
Yes.
We love stories.
Do.
The story is that over the last 20 years, I've been designing these community development, local economic development initiatives around the country for various clients of various scales, right? And like I said earlier, these projects are sort of destined for failure.
Yes.
The best statistic in South Africa right now is that about 20% of these impact development projects succeed.
Wow.
And that's just the financial system,
Sure.
right? It's Pareto, 20% success makes up for the 80% failure,
Okay.
theoretically, on paper in an economic model, right? But it's not true because it's not just money, it's people,
Yes.
you know. So for every 100 kids that get bursaries, only 20 of them actually make it into the economy.
Wow. That's shocking, actually.
Yeah. But that's a whole different way of looking at it. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, so that's just the reality. And if you think about all of the companies that are just doling out these bursaries now,
Yeah.
Right.
all over, and and we all know theoretically again that all that's resulted in is a growing number of unemployed graduates,
Yes.
right? Because that's another conversation we have, but we have these conversations in kind of parallel to each other, not
Yeah. I know what
Yes.
you mean.
Yes.
Yeah,
Not
that's very
together.
true. Yeah. Yeah.
So for a long time, I internalized that failure, right? Obviously, I did what everybody does. It wasn't like I was doing everything according to the book, but it wasn't working. So obviously, it's me. It was almost like I went through, those 12 steps of grief. You know, you go from like denial to like
Anger, bargaining.
and all of those things.
Yes.
So I don't know which step I'm at now, but like now, it's definitely not me.
Good. That's a good place to be.
And I realized it was definitely not me, probably about 11 years ago. And I was like, okay, so if it's not me, what needs to change?
Right.
And I had a conversation with a bursary recipient. Right? It was really fascinating because she was applying for a second-year bursary. We had given her a bursary for the first year, and she didn't make the results required to get into second year. But she still applied, and I called her in, and I was like, what's going on? And she says, you don't understand. For you, success was normal, and failure was abnormal. For me, failure is normal, and success is abnormal. Right? And if you think about the average experience of the average South African under 25-year-old right now, that's the truth. Failure is normal, success is abnormal. Unemployment is normal, employment is abnormal.
Yeah.
Alcoholism is normal, and being sober is abnormal. Right? And everybody, it's a human condition, we all want to fit in.
Yeah.
Right. So that was the sort of impediment to development that I kind of realized at that point. You can give the kids bursaries, but you can't change the human condition, just by paying school fees.
Yes.
So what can we do to sort of, you also can't necessarily shift what's normal, right, without fundamentally changing the system.
The system, exactly.
So what can we do to help them realize that being abnormal is okay? And then I tried everything. I tried everything. We were doing community psychology and trauma counseling, and we were even doing like yoga and TRE at one point, and you can imagine like in rural classrooms, people like tapping themselves, like we did everything. And it was difficult to convince clients to release budgets, to try these woo things, right?
Sure.
to help kids realize that being abnormal is okay.
Yes.
And then I found breathwork, which is where the story is supposed to go. And I found breathwork not for my work, but for my own children. And I saw what an amazing shift resulted from them doing breathwork consistently. And I was like, what if we tried this free thing that you don't have to convince anybody or anything to try in these communities? And what will it do? And then we started instilling or starting every session we had with kids or community members of any kind of variation with some breath awareness and then some breath work, and sort of just reminded everybody who they are and then who they're connected to and that's what we are playing with right now.
Wow. That's incredible.
I mean, on that, like, how do we, in our own capacity, become servant leaders beyond the boardroom and our corporate spaces in communities and relational spaces?
Sure. I don't know how everybody's going to do it, but what's been a game changer for me is just giving myself permission to be abnormal, right? Yeah. Telling the whole story, the good, bad, ugly, dirty, clean, acknowledge the devil on the shoulder and the angel, all of it. And just allowing myself to be a whole person rather than just the glossy PR person has been a game changer for me because it allows me to meet people where they are.
I'm with you on that. Completely on the same journey.
Oh, really?
Completely on the same journey.
I've been watching it.
Play
up close and personal. No, it's a joy to see it. Which is interesting because, obviously now you've spoken about the breath. So it's even more intriguing. That's how Kalnisha and our relationship began, because we're both practitioners and from the same school, Breathwork Africa. Yeah, what are your thoughts on the breath and systems?
So what's been really interesting for me is that, I think my journey with breathwork, which has been like the last 5 years, has mimicked my sort of realizations and reflections about systems. Right.
Okay.
So acknowledging, breathing is something so intrinsic to humans, right?
Yes.
It's our first act on this earth.
Yes.
Outside of our mothers is to breathe. Yes. And everybody celebrates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the wail that comes with it.
Yeah, everyone celebrates, but it's our first sort of magnanimous act that creates all of the celebration, but it's also extremely painful for that little baby, right? Which is why it's like this, and it's everything that like life has to offer. It's like this complete duality,
Yes.
Complete blessing, complete curse as well.
Right.
And I think allowing myself to be aware of my own breath and my own relationship with my breathing and my body has also, I don't know, I think it just naturally and organically allows everyone around me to acknowledge their own relationship with themselves. It's also, and my story with breathwork started because of my children, because I wanted to give them tools to self-regulate without pharmaceutical intervention.
Sure.
Right, and that was my 100% mission to myself. Like, they need to be able to self-regulate without relying on external things. So we did lots of things at the same time as we did breathwork. We did yoga, we did meditation, we did lots of other things. Breathwork is the one that stuck with them because it's so natural. And what being aware of your breath does for you is it gives you agency. It makes you realize that I am in control, actually. I'm in control of everything that I can be in control of.
Yes.
Everything else is like not my business.
Yes.
And that is wonderfully empowering.
Yes.
And so when you give somebody or you allow somebody around, like in your space, to have that relationship or form that relationship with themselves, that's the ultimate sense of empowerment. It's like you allowing a person to realize that they're in control. And that's been the game changer for me in my work.
Thank you for that reminder. Even as you were saying that, it reminded me of what drew me to it as well. But the power of that, and the power of, there's something about what you just described that you almost answer some of what we are speaking about in terms of embracing that agency for the individual, to help them, I don't know, get in touch with the autonomy, to connect, with themselves so they can meet whatever comes their way. And I think that's part of what I often want to scream to people. It's not about the success or the failure. It's about meeting it. Mm-hmm. Being a willing participant in just meeting whatever comes your way or whatever you encounter in life, and that the breath has been an incredible anchor. And I think that's just what you've reflected, Yeah.
I mean, I like the version of the story I tell myself around control, because obviously I like being in control. But also because all other kind of schools of thought is like, oh, you must surrender and
yes,
you're never in control. And I was like, no, that's not true. We choose how we react in any situation. We choose what we do with the 18 hours of the day that we're awake, And those choices could reflect the current situation we're living in.
Yes.
Sure. But it's still a choice every moment of every day. Right? If we can control our breath, literally.
Yes.
We can control everything. We can control our thoughts. We can control our emotions. We can control our actions and our reactions. Yeah. And that's all we have to do, actually.
Exactly. I think that's such an important message, but one that's very difficult for people to embrace. I think for human beings to admit, first of all, about what you're saying, about control and our relationship with control, because of our incredible anxiety, that a lot of us live with. And I think the world increasingly, makes us believe is the truth, but it's really not the truth of who we are. That's one component. That's one experience we're having. Yeah. So thank you for that. That's such what a remarkable reminder.
Yeah. So I guess I ask you, Kalnisha, what's this one small thing you do to stay grounded when the world really expects so much of you and you feel overwhelmed to do on a day, even if it's a little quirky to someone?
Everything I do is quirky.
I love that. Oh, I love that. In fact, I won't say it here because we had a plan, but in line with that. But that's the movement and getting back into the body, right? You see, this is why I say you embody the matriarch, because the matriarch understands that the head can only take us so far, right? And that it goes beyond that. And I think it's about the merging of the two, for sure, right? And they both have their place. But understanding that when you're getting back into the body, you touch the truth, I think.
There are a few standard sayings in my household. The one is, you can't be sad if you're wiggling your bum. It is physically impossible.
It's true. Yeah. That is true.
Shake your hips and wiggle your bum, and sadness just dissipates.
Yeah, I love that.
Perhaps as we kind of bring the conversation to a close, what is a quote or anything that you'd want to leave us with, right? I think you've come and shared really beautifully today a little bit about that. Yeah. What would you like to leave us with?
I think the ultimate kind of liberation is acknowledging your own story. And all of it, all of the story, all the characters and all the versions of you that have lived through the story. And I think that very few people actually allow themselves the opportunity to reflect. I think for some reason we're wired to believe that it's very selfish and self-serving. And that's not the truth, right? like stars didn't die in the universe to create us in order for us to be hamsters on a wheel.
Yeah.
Like there is this bigger, and the bigger essence of who we are is to exist and experience humanity and all of humanness in its fullest form. And I think we must just allow ourselves to do that.
Wow. Wow.
I think for myself just today if I look at some of the research I did and I listened to you actually sitting in front of your energy today, I'm really struck by your humility. That you're so humble with all the achievements. If I look at what's transpired in your career and what you've achieved thus far, and if I look back at some of the research and I looked at some of your journey of like your schooling, Model C school, very early 90s, and I can understand that struggle that you may have had and where you are today, where you are, and some of the roles you've played in different organizations and stuff. But I think the biggest part about that is your humility. And that's so encouraging to see, because if I look at some people that may have achieved what you have, it's very easy not to sit here grounded and speak about what you've spoken about today. So the fact that you can speak so openly and so honest today, I think is the biggest achievement of all for me. And that's so wonderful to see.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I obviously echo what Lincoln has said, but I'm just glad that I got to share you with the world, because I mean, we spent like a year just seeing each other virtually when we were in the 2022 cohort of Breathwork Africa. But it's interesting, like, and as we know, as a rule now, that energy is simultaneous and immediate. And so, yeah, I'd already liked you, and loved what you were sharing. And I think we might have done one sort of breakout room together while we were online. But I guess I'm so glad that I got to share this and, and have this conversation with you on this podcast. And I think from what Lincoln was saying, I adore how deeply human you are. I adore how deeply human you are and how I can see that you lead with that. And that's what we are interested in. That I know that's what I'm interested in. So if I, lean towards someone and I'm sitting with them for dinner, breakfast, and lunch, it's because I sense that about them, and it's an energy, that you carry. And yeah, I'm so grateful to have encountered it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So for myself, Lincoln, until next time.
And we, Shaamiela, we send you greetings and love. Stay human.
Well, that was The Human Story, brought to you by Yoked Media. Stay tuned for more on The Human Story.